you put us down.
I'm Nigel Oseland of DEGW, and this is a narration of a presentation I gave recently at the workplace consulting organisation's Pecha Kucha evening, where we debated tomorrow's workplace will be depressingly similar to today's. My presentation was against the motion. So what do we actually mean by tomorrow? Well, for those of you who can remember Raymond Baxter and the Tomorrow's World team, they were always talking about the next 20 years or so. And as our discussion is around the next generation, I'm assuming we mean the next 20 to 30 years rather than literally the day after today. Now, you've probably all heard the old adage that work is an activity, not a place. We can work at home, we can work in cafes, we work on the move, we can work anywhere today. And it also includes meetings, networking and thinking time. The workplace is where we are, not just the office. This is all due to evolving technology, and this was a 1954 mock-up of what they thought the home office or home computer might look like in the future. And I remember when I first started work, my computer was that big and it was replaced by an Apple IIe. But the reality, of course, is that computers now are much more portable, they're inexpensive and they're pervasive, they're everywhere. Kids start using computers pretty much as soon as they get to school. They live in a digital age, and if my kids are anything to go by, they've no idea what analogue devices such as LPs and typewriters are. The way the next generation of workers work will be different to us. The Gen Y millennials are multitaskers. They like to be treated like partners. They want to manage their own time, and they want a more social and unstructured workplace. I calculate by the year 2030, the workplace will be occupied by 25% Gen X and 75% Gen Y. And they all very much use social media. That's part of the way they work. They like to publish, they like to be public, they like to be networked and share. And I suspect most of the people in this audience haven't heard of most of these social media sites. This is a school that we recently completed at DEGW, and it's part of the personalised learning programme. What you'll see here is that we recognise that kids did not need to sit at desks to learn. They don't have libraries now in universities. They have social learning centres which facilitate group work as well as quiet work. And because computing is pervasive, and because of the internet and wireless and cheap laptops, it means we are all now connected. This means we can widen our recruitment pool to attract mobile workers that aren't near the office. And also it provides us with oversourced resource so we can offshore our basic services. Currently most of us work within the service or knowledge sector, but we are entering a new age represented by the quaternary economic sector, that of creativity and innovation. I believe it is providing space for interaction and collaboration that will lead us to economic recovery rather than processing data at desks. And we'll probably hear that property is a supertanker. It's slow to change course. There's a lag between demand and supply, between property and GDP. But we know what happens to supertankers that don't change course. Basically, they crash and burn, then sink and ultimately disappear. But the property industry must change to survive. We must become more nimble, faster and flexible. And whether you agree with that or not, I do believe that property is actually changing. If we look at the London skyline and how that has changed over the last 10 years, and despite the current hiatus, it will continue to change. We've seen new shapes go up, such as the Gherkin and Palestra, and we'll soon see the completion of Strata, and the Shard will soon go up. So the physical place itself is actually changing. But of course it's often said that what goes on inside those shapes isn't changing, and that offices haven't changed much since the turn of the century when we introduced typewriters, dictaphones and women into the workplace. But of course this is rubbish. The workplace has changed and it's constantly evolving. I'm sure we've all seen pictures of Google Zurich, but what's impressive is how they provided spaces for interaction, spaces for collaboration, but also spaces for contemplation and socialising, and spaces for quiet work and private conversation. And I suspect that the percentage of collaboration space in an office has increased, whereas the percentage of desk space has decreased. And I know some of you were down recently at Unilever in Leatherhead, a highly branded and eclectic space. And again, you know, when you visit there, you're presented with a scoop of Ben & Jerry's ice cream rather than a cup of coffee. The workplace is changing, and we only have to look at the books of Morrison and Ross to realise that. And it's not just the new fancy corporates that are changing. It's also the public sector too, whether UK or abroad. This is South Australian Water, who moved from pretty much full-on cellular to complete open plan. They've become more open, accessible, and have improved communication. And I know what you might say, is that, well, this is only happening in a few organisations, but I disagree. I think it is changing everywhere. However, so what if it is only a few? These are the catwalk, these are the haute couture, and elements of what they do will become mainstream. But despite these visual changes to the workplace, I think it's the things that we cannot see that have changed the most and are more impressive. The IT infrastructure, the building services, the way that buildings are managed, and most importantly, the way that we now use buildings. My prediction is that buildings will become a base for the services that support mobility. They'll facilitate face-to-face and virtual interaction. The infrastructure will allow communication through email, mobile phones and other media, and they will provide a hub of assistance for mobile workers. I believe the property industry is predominantly made up of 40-something old men, out of touch with the needs of the younger workforce. Or worse still, it's made up of fat cats out to make a quick return on low-risk air-conditioned boxes. Don't be an old bagpuss and vote against the motion. Vote red. Thank you.